to summer art lessons via video, but it's okay. We're gonna get back together maybe next year a little bit, but welcome to this lesson. My name is Linda Slack, and a lot of you I have had before at the library, and we've had a pretty good time. This time, I'm gonna miss you, but I think we can still pull off a pretty nice, fun project for you. In your kits that you received, you have some supplies, and for the project we're going to do today, I want to check to make sure you have all the supplies you need. The first thing you need is a large piece of watercolor paper, and I believe that's in your packet. And then you need a smaller piece of watercolor paper. You'll notice they're not the same size. There's a large one and a small one. We have our watercolor paint. You have a kit like this, watercolor paint in it. And I believe you have a couple brushes. I know you have a large one like this. And then you may have some brushes of your own, but I also believe in your kit that there is at least one small brush for you to use. If you have others, you can bring those also and do that. You might want a pencil. That's not in your kit. You might want an eraser. You do have a black crayon. It's kind of a big fat crayon, and you're going to need that. You do have a piece of string. It's not cut yet, it's just a piece of string. You also have a brown piece of paper. It looks like a scrap, but don't throw it away because we need that piece. You will, in addition, need to have your own glue, and you can use any kind of glue that you want. And probably a pair of scissors would be helpful. We know how to be really careful with our scissors. So that's pretty much it, except because we are doing watercolor, you need water and always some paper towels. So what are we going to do today? We're going to create a watercolor painting of a hot air balloon. We're going to do it in parts. There are pieces of the art put together here. We have a background piece. We have the balloon, which is a separate piece. We've got a little basket down here, and we have the ties, the strings, the ropes that hold the balloon to the basket. I hope some of you have seen hot air balloons in the sky. Now is probably the time of the year that you will see more of them. And in Alliance, we have the hot air balloon liftoff during the Carnation Week at Carnation Days in the Park. And hopefully this year, they'll get to take off. We always look forward to that. All right, so we're going to start the project. First of all, I would suggest that you cover your surface area with newspaper or plastic or something so that you're not getting a mess on a table, because we don't want that to happen. You're going to first begin with this large piece of paper. There's nothing drawn on it, but I do need you to know that there is a front and a back. It's a little tricky. The side you want to paint on is a little bit rougher than the side you don't want to paint on. If you make a mistake, if it is not correct, it's really all right, but it just works a little better if it's on the rougher piece. This is called watercolor paper. And we're going to use this big old brush. This is not really an art brush. It's used for lots of things, and you can see the hair on the brush is kind of scraggly, but that's okay because we don't really care. And you're going to have your watercolor paint. I always suggest to you that you put a little water in each of the color trays before you begin. What does that do? That allows the paint to soften a little bit so that when we're ready to paint it, or put the paint on our paper, it will be ready to go and we don't have to wait for it to soften up a little bit. So we did that. All right, to begin, you're going to take plain clear water, and I'm going to try to do this upside down a little bit so that you can see it. I'm just painting water. onto my large piece of watercolor paper. And you can do the whole thing. I'm only going to go halfway for now. It's just water, nothing else on it, okay? And because this is going to be the background of our hot air balloon picture, we want it to be in the sky. And you could do it all blue. You could add some yellow or orange in the top part if you'd like. And then as we work down, you might get a little bit more blue like the sky would be. I'm going to start with a little bit of yellow because I think it's a sunny day. So all I'm going to do is put a little bit of yellow. And you can see it's not very dark. That's okay. We're just going to paint that on there. A little bit of yellow. And we also know that it isn't just plain yellow, so I'm going to put a little streak of orange in it, because I like the way the sun looks. Not much to that. I always rinse my brush when I change color, and you should too. All right, now I'm going to finish putting water on the rest of my paper. This is where the newspaper comes in handy because it's keeping my surface clean. All right, there we go. This time I'm going to go to the blue. I'm going to grab some blue paint. Look what happens when we paint it on the water background. It kind of blends and bleeds a little bit. And that's fun. And I like the way it looks together. It just kind of runs together. And I think I'm going to add a tiny bit of purple because that makes the sky a little bit brighter, a little different color. Go all the way to the edge for your background. And if you want to add other colors, it's your painting. You can do what you like. I think I'm going to go back up here and add a little bit more yellow because I kind of want it a little brighter. I might even just bring it down into the blue a little bit. All right, that's it. Done. We're going to let it dry. Put your brush away. What you can do if you want to try to just be creative a little bit is to take a paper towel and or a tissue and blot it. What that does, it kind of looks like there's some clouds happening in the sky. If you like it the way you had it, just let it go. But I kind of like to play with it once in a while. All right, that piece is done, and we are going to set it aside to dry. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. I kind of like the way that worked. All right, next, hot air balloons are beautiful, and if you've had an opportunity to ride in one or to see one, you know that they are lots of colors. And hot air balloons are individual. Lots of times people design them so that they are very personal. I kind of like this one because it sort of looks patriotic with red, white, and blue and some yellow stars. That's kind of an interesting design. This one's a little fancier with the streamers that come out from around the balloons. Now, these balloons are made out of a cloth or silk material, so they are very, very soft and very pliable, but the colors are what I think is pretty exciting to see when they're in the sky. Here's another couple balloons. Notice the designs on these. Here's a real simple one. And this one's a little fancier, kind of like that one with the stripes on it. And this is the one I did with a lot of different designs on it. So we're going to try to play with designs. So you know what a balloon looks like. A balloon is round, and when you blow it up, it gets even a neat shape and usually has kind of a narrow bottom where you tie it off. Well, if you'll notice, the hot air balloons are also that kind of a shape. They look like a round part to start, and then as it gets down towards the bottom where it's going to attach to the basket that people can ride in, it gets narrower. This is your small piece of watercolor paper, and this is what we're going to do our sketch on. I suggested that you had a pencil, and we're going to just sketch it. Now, some of you are really good and you know how to do this without sketching. That's fine. But if you feel more comfortable, and you'll notice I'm going to draw really light, I'm going to just draw kind of a large round shape that narrows down a little bit to the bottom. So this would be the top of the balloon, and this would be the bottom. If you've ever gone to Silver Park when they're letting the balloons fill up, you notice that there's a hole at the bottom, and they have fire that is making heat that blows hot air up into the silk or the material, and it makes the balloon inflate. We want to be able to see the inflated balloon. So now I have this basic shape, and again, it's just in pencil, it's nothing fancy. But now I have to decide, how am I going to decorate my balloon? I want my balloon to look like my own idea, my own design. I don't want to really copy anybody else's, but I do like the idea of having some stripes on it. Now I want to remind you, when the balloon is inflated, it is round. It is not flat like this piece of paper. It is round. So to make our balloon look round, we're going to have to draw curved lines. Well, I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to draw a curved line all the way down to the bottom. That's one. And I think I want another stripe, so I'm curving it to come down to the bottom. And then I think I'll add one more, leave some space there. So I have 1, 2, 3 lines here, and I think I need another one right here. And then I'm going to do the same thing going the opposite direction. I'm going to make a curved line here, another one. And how many did I have over here? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, I'm going to have to do 3, because I want them to match 4. It is symmetrical, it's the same on both sides. So those would be my stripes. Notice how they are curved. It will help us when we're doing our painting, so it looks like a round shape. That's a little bit boring. I think I want some more design in it. So I'm going to add a zigzag between those lines. Just a fancy zigzag, simple zigzag. You can make it as fancy or as plain as you want. It's not very even, but that's okay. I'm going to match it, leave a thickness between it. And you can do it fancier, bigger, little. Like we said, you can add stars maybe some triangles. I'm going to add some lines down at the bottom. Now these are lines that you'll notice I'm going over my other lines. That's okay, because we're going to erase if we need to. And look at how these are curved. We have to follow the curve of the balloon. And I think I'll just do 1, 2 more lines at the top. So maybe that's all I want for my balloon. I'll take my eraser, and I'm going to take out these lines because I want it to be a stripe. And maybe I'll take out these lines because maybe I want that to be a stripe too. And these I want to be zigzag design, so I'm going to take out the lines I don't need. Now for you older students, you might keep going and add lots more patterns. You might add circles, or you might, like in this one, build up designs within each of your stripes and create a really interesting pattern. But again, notice it is symmetrical, same on both sides. Even if you do a simple one like this, it is the same on both sides. And then you can create your pattern. This is the design that we were just drawing, but on the other side I had done another pattern, and I'm going to show you what to do next to make our finished project look a little bit more complete, and it's going to pop when we add color. You have a black crayon, and you have lines that you drew, or if you didn't draw them, you can start right with your crayon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this crayon and I am going to press really hard on the crayon, and I'm going over all of the lines that I want to keep. When we've done projects before, we've talked about the fact that sometimes we might draw something and maybe we don't want that line. Well, then don't trace that line. It's perfectly fine. So you see I traced the outside edge of my balloon where I had drawn the shape, and the crayon is going to add not only a nice dark black line, but it is also going to help us with watercolor, and you'll see how that works in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and keep pressing hard with my black crayon as I trace over my design, and you can do the same thing with yours. All right, you'll notice that I spent some time outlining, and I did press very hard with my black crayon. Look what happened to the point. I used it pretty much all the way up, didn't I? But that's okay. The reason we had a big fat crayon was because I wanted you to have nice, dark, wide lines in black. And this is for two reasons. I mentioned to you that would help outline the shape and the design that you made, but it is also really helpful when we start the painting part. Because if you remember, a crayon is made of wax, and it will resist, it's called watercolor resist, the colors, the paint, because we're just using water and paint. When it touches the crayon, it kind of bubbles up and it walks away from the crayon. So that's the other purpose of it. Plus, I think it looks really good. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to start painting. And I know a lot of you like a lot of color. So on your balloon, I would suggest you use as much color as you can. It wouldn't look very good to paint the whole balloon yellow, or maybe paint the whole balloon pink or orange or whatever color you like. It just wouldn't be as interesting. So here, I'm going to use as many colors as I can. I will suggest that you do not use black because it will not show up very well. I know a lot of you like to use black in your paintings, and that's okay, but on this one, I'm not sure you want to do that. Look what happens when I'm taking and putting the watercolor right next to the crayon. You notice it's not sticking. It's sort of just making a nice outline for my paint to sit in there. I'm using a wide brush, but you can use any kind of brush you want. I would not go back and use this brush. It's too big. That was only for our background, so we really don't need them. I do want to remind you that when you change colors, always rinse out your brush. Make sure you've got clean bristles on your brush when you change colors. So this is just going to be me sort of playing with my paint. And I am playing with it because I'm sort of experimenting. I'm painting mine upside down, so it might look a little funny, but you can add your own style to this. And again, you notice what I'm doing, what I'm following my design by keeping, if I start with this shape and I want to do it red, I'm doing that whole shape across the balloon, that same color. If you don't like that and you want to make each one of those shapes a different color, go ahead. It's your balloon. You can do whatever you want. Just like to play with the paint. And watercolor is pretty fun to paint with, but I think what makes this a whole lot easier is the fact that that black crayon keeps the paint in the little spaces. Kind of like that. And maybe a little bit more red down here, sort of like the way it kind of pulls together. Some of you like to use one color at a time like I just did and do everything that color first. So I've done every place that I want red, I've done red first. And every place I wanted yellow, I went ahead and did the yellow. Now I'm going to add some different colors. And I don't know, I guess I kind of want a little bit of purple in there. Kind of like purple. So I'm going to paint some stripes of my balloon purple. Is it starting to look fancy for you? I hope so. The nice thing about this project is that you can start and stop whenever you want. If you are working on this and it's a rainy day outside and all of a sudden the sun comes out and you say, you know what, I don't want to paint anymore, stop. It won't hurt your project at all. This is one that you can start and stop as often as you need to. If we were here at the library like we used to be, we would be doing this project in about an hour or a little bit longer maybe. So don't rush through it. If you get tired of painting, stop. It's perfectly all right. I like that kind of opportunity. All right, so I'm gonna keep painting and you keep painting, and then we're gonna come back and see how we've done. All right, so you see that I've taken some time and I finished painting mine, and I added a lot of color. Remember I said I was doing mine upside down, sorry. And you'll notice part of mine's missing, and I'll explain that to you in a minute. So we're allowing now for the paint to dry. Remember, we had to set our background aside to let it dry, and now we have to let the balloon dry. Because if we try to do anything with it now, the colors will all kind of run together depending on how much water you used. But you notice what happened when we used the watercolor paint next to our black crayon. It didn't allow the colors to run if we stayed inside our black line. So I kind of like the idea of using the black crayon instead of a marker. I know some of you like to use those Sharpie markers, and that's great, but the black crayon with watercolor works really, really well, and you can do it for lots of different things. So we're gonna just put this over here for a minute and let it dry, and hopefully it'll dry. If you are done with your paint, one of the things you remember you want to do with your paint is make sure you clean your paint. If by some chance you mixed colors, perhaps you took purple and then you liked yellow and you didn't rinse your brush, if it got all mixed up, take a paper towel and gently wipe out any missed color. Or maybe if you have some extra water, you might want to take a little of the water out so that when you close it up, it doesn't go all over everything. But when we're done with the watercolor, we're going to close it up and put it aside. We don't need it anymore today, unless you want to paint something else, which is all right too. The next thing I want you to take is a little piece of brown paper you have. I mentioned to you that when you are in a hot air balloon, there is a basket. And the basket is where the people and the pilot who drives or helps the balloon go in its direction sit. And many times they stand in the basket. And it's usually made out of wicker or actual basket material. So we just picked a piece of brown paper, a little bit of a rectangle or square in your supplies. And on this side, I drew the beginnings of a basket. Now you can make the basket the whole size of the paper if you want to, or you can make it smaller. You can add detail to it. I used my black crayon again, and I'm just going to add just some little lines to make it look a little fancier. And I want it to look like it's a basket, so I might draw some lines across it to make it look a little bit baskety. Now I'm not going to add color to mine, but if you want to, you could go back and you could use a crayon, you could use your watercolor on the brown paper. You might be surprised at what it would do. You could even color it in a little bit if you wanted to make it have a design on it. That would be all right too. I hadn't thought about that until just now. We could add that to it. It might look a little bit more like a basket. All right, so now I'm going to take and cut the basket to a little bit better shape. But again, I said if you want to use your whole piece, you can certainly do that. So there's my basket. Kind of cut off that end there, that wasn't good. Put that back. All right, so this would be the basket for my balloon. You notice there's some other things on this hot air balloon. Looks like lines. Well, those lines are the ropes or the string that hold the balloon, once it's been inflated, to the basket. If you just had the balloon and there was nothing holding it on, what do you think would happen? It would just float up in the air. Well, we need to have things to attach the balloon to the basket so people can ride in it. So what we did, we cut this, and now we're going to cut our balloon. And mine still looks a tiny bit wet, but I think I'm gonna be safe. I already had started cutting it and noticed that it was wet, so I stopped. But now I'm going to take my scissors and I'm gonna cut out the outside edge of my balloon. You probably want to leave a little of the black crayon show. And I know some of you, this may be really hard to cut the whole thing, so cut a chunk, take that piece away, go back in and cut another piece. It's very hard sometimes to try to cut it all in one cutting, especially with watercolor paper. It's very stiff and it's kind of hard to get your scissors in there. So don't think you have to do it all at once. You can cut it into pieces, and those pieces we don't need anymore, so we can get rid of those. All right, so there's our hot air balloon, and here's our basket. So we have the pieces. Now we're going to need something else. We're going to put these aside for a minute, and you have a piece of string. Now you probably have more string than you need. I'm going to suggest that you fold the string in half and in half again. So it will give you a length that they're all the same. And then I'm going to take my scissors and just cut it. Now you can cut it any way you want to, but I thought that worked out pretty nicely because now all of my pieces are the same length. And I need those. So now we have our balloon, we have our basket, and we have the string. So we're going to go back to our background. And it turned out pretty good. I sort of like that. It has some neat colors in here. Looks sort of like the sun might be shining through the clouds. I like the way that turned out. If you don't like yours, if it's not dark enough, or you want to add more to it, go back to your watercolor. Maybe add a little bit more color in the background. You could even take some scraps of your watercolor paper and cut out clouds if you want to and glue them in the background. That would be kind of fun. Hadn't thought about that either, but we could do that real quickly. Think about some ways that you might add some fluffy little clouds in the background, and you could glue those on to your background without wasting any materials or getting another piece of material. You've got scraps. Use your scraps up. It's always good to recycle and use things over again. So there we've got a couple clouds, and we could glue those down if we wanted to. Then we're going to take our hot air balloon and we're going to glue it down. Now, if you chose to use clouds, you might arrange them somehow. I don't know that I'm going to use them. I'm going to take those out, but you can use them if you want to. All right, so there's my hot air balloon, and you notice I put it up a little bit to the top of my paper, and here's my basket. I'm going to put the basket down below the balloon a little bit and sort of position them the way I want them to look. I kind of like the way that's working, so I'm going to take my school glue or my white glue, and we're just going to put a little bit. Remember, little dots of glue. You don't need a ton of it. And don't just stick it in the middle. Make sure you go around the edges so it will hold nicely for you. Here's your basket. We'll hold it down. I will tell you that because the watercolor paper is a little thicker, you might need to use a little bit more glue than just dots, but you don't want it so much that it scooches out all around the edges. Scooch is a word I make up, but you don't want it to go all over your picture. So I put glue on there, tap it. And you might even, what I found I did when I made a practice one of this at home, I laid it down and then I put a piece of paper on top and I weighted it with a book. I put a book on top of it to hold it down so that it wouldn't curl up while it was waiting to dry. So there you go. It might take a little bit of time to do that. All right, now these strings are pretty important to us because that's what's going to hook our basket to our hot air balloon. I'm going to go back and figure out, how do I want to attach this balloon to my basket? Do I want to touch it from the bottom? Probably not, because I need a little bit more secure way to hold it. So I'm going to start my strings up here. On my sample one, my other sample one, you'll notice I kind of put it up at the top also. So you don't want it all the way up here, but somewhere in between the halfway point and the bottom, you're going to decide where your strings are going to go. And you might even, I'm going to draw 1, 2, 3, I'm going to do 4 dots, because I think that's where I want my strings to be, and that way it kind of reminds me where I want to put them. And then they're going to have to attach to the basket, so I'm going to add 1 more set of dots. Not fancy, but that just gives them a little place to head for. Okay, let's see what happens. Do I have enough string to attach this dot to that? Yeah, I do, so that will work. Don't worry if it's too long right now. Don't worry if it's too long. What I would suggest also, and you might need help with this, some of you who have little tiny hands, you might need a grown-up to help you tie a knot in the top piece of each of your string. This just makes it look a little bit more like an attaching string to your balloon. It looks a little bit more finished. And if your string is too long on the end, we're going to trim them off. We're just putting a little tiny knot on the end. Nothing fancy. And if you don't want the knot, don't put it on. But I just sort of liked the way it looked a little bit. And I'm going to take the edges off of that because it was a little too long. Okay? All right. Now you need your glue again. This time I'm going to put a drop of glue on each of those little dots that I used, so I know where my strings are going to go. I'm going to go ahead and do it down here too, because it won't dry right away, so we're all right. And you'll notice my glue is a little stringy, and that's okay, it'll dry, it's clear. Okay, see what's happening to my balloon? It's not sticking, and that's because I didn't weight it down, so I may have to hold it a little bit so I can get it to stick. We do want it to be attached. That's a little better. All right, here we go. We're going to take our string with the knot end, and I'm going to lay one string in this glob of glue, little dot of glue, and I'm going to lay the other string, and you'll notice I did not tie a knot in that end. I just put it on, and I'm going to use my scissors to push it down into my glue. And you have to wipe your scissors off. I'm going to take the next one and drop the knot into the glue here and down here. And you can stretch it pretty good. And put this into the glue down at the bottom. Same thing with this one and the next one. We're just going to keep doing the same thing here. You know that when you use white school glue, or whatever kind of glue you're using, Elmer's glue or whatever craft glue you have, it does need to dry. You don't want to pick up your artwork until it dries. So we're going to have to let this sit a little bit. So I'm going to make sure that the string is down into those drops of glue. And now I sort of like the way it turned out. I have my hot air balloon with my fancy designs and lots of colors on a background of watercolor paper. I've got a basket that people could sit in and take a ride in, and I have strings that are holding my balloon to the basket. So we're pretty much done. You will notice that there's some extra strings. Well, once the glue dries, you're going to take your scissors, and I'll do one real quickly even though it's not quite dry yet, and you're just going to clip off the little piece so that it doesn't hang down. But it's okay, it still sticks up. So when you are finished, what you might choose to do is glue this piece onto a background, another background, to make like a little frame. This is just a piece of construction paper. So I took this project and I glued it on a piece of black construction paper so it looked like it was finished. So I hope you had fun playing with watercolor, backgrounds, hot air balloons, strings, baskets, all of the things that go together to make a nice piece of art. And I also hope that you will send in pictures to the library so that we can see all of the things you have done this summer. So thank you very, very much for playing with watercolor today, and enjoy yourself. Have a great rest of your summer. Bye now.